Hello, welcome to the Community Gardening webinar series presented by University of Illinois Extension. I'm Andrew Holsinger, and I'm a horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, partnering with Nancy Creeth to present successful community gardening. I'm presenting Module 2 of the series. This module, Module 2, will cover site-specific considerations. It will give you details to remember when planning your community garden. Our first topic of discussion is soil, and some of the items I will be discussing are soil quality and sourcing, where to find your soil for your community garden, calculating the soil needs, preparing a new bed, and if the soil is poor or contaminated, it may be a consideration to use raised beds. Soil is an important aspect when it comes to a community garden. The physical and chemical characteristics of the soil will help determine your success. Choose a high-quality topsoil or compost. You need to determine if there are any previous contaminants that may be in your garden site. Soil contaminants have sometimes been avoided by the use of raised beds. Here we see two examples of raised beds, and as you can see, they may vary in size depending on your construction materials. So it's important to determine what the volume of your raised bed will be by the length times the width times the height, and that will give you the cubic feet. Once you determine your cubic feet, you can divide by 27 and it will give you how many cubic yards are needed. When preparing your new bed, you'll preferably start on level ground. You'll need to remove any existing vegetation. In removing woody plants, you'll have to dig out the roots as best you can. Apply a systemic herbicide to kill any perennial weeds and prevent them from returning. You can also kill weeds without herbicide by applying a barrier of either cardboard or newspaper and let that degrade over time. Another method called lasagna gardening is also referred to as sheet gardening, and it builds a compost layer from the ground up and is a no-till, no-dig method of gardening. Raised beds have many benefits, but one of the key benefits is the suitability to use on a contaminated site. Using the raised bed can help avoid contaminated soil. Some of the other benefits is that the soil tends to warm up more quickly than the in-ground counterpart, and it does have good drainage and tends to have fewer pests. Size does matter for a raised bed. Typically 12 to 24 inches high is ideal, but as low as 6 inches can be sufficient. A 4-foot width is the ideal width as it allows plenty of accessibility within an arm's reach. Construction materials vary when used in a community garden, but when building raised beds, you need to use non-arsenic treated lumber. The CCA lumber was phased out by 2004. The EPA states that copper-treated lumber is safe for food production, but there are some untreated options that are available in white or red cedar and also pine. You may have to have an electric power source needed for the installation during the day. Water supplies may vary from urban and rural communities. You'll want to be familiar with your water source for the garden and any rules your garden may have in place. Some gardens have water tanks, hydrants, faucets, or even rain barrels. It's important to have the water tested to make sure that it is safe to use. Rain barrels can have a risk as well as well water. Also, pumping from a ditch can have contaminants that could be troublesome. Pesticide applications can be used in the community garden, but many community gardens do not allow pesticides. You'll have to check with your own garden's rules and ask questions before using any products. Sometimes it's designated that only one person would apply to all of the plots in a community garden, but be sure to follow label instructions and all of the directions when using pesticides in the garden. GAPS is an acronym for Good Agricultural Practices. These good agricultural practices are implemented and documented as part of an audit process to minimize the microbial food safety hazards on a farm. GAPS can also be related to the community garden as well. Using good protocols for sanitation can help reduce human pathogens that can contaminate fresh produce. GAPS helps verify the adherence to recommendations made in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's Guide to Minimize Microbial Food Safety Hazards for Fresh Fruits and Vegetables. Animals can be a great pest to the community garden, so here are some helpful tips. Restrict nesting and hiding places for rats and mice by mowing the grass and other vegetation around the edges of the garden. Don't feed birds near your garden, as the wild bird seed can attract rodents. Watch out for standing water that can harbor mosquitoes. Regularly harvest your vegetables and remove any rotting vegetables that may be in the garden. Monitor the garden for fresh animal feces and don't harvest crops that may be observed near it. Erect and maintain a fence around the garden is a great way to exclude wildlife. Here are some resources to be used in your quest of a community garden, and refer to our handouts for more information. Thanks to the U of I Extension educators that provided information and materials for this presentation. This concludes Module 2. Feel free to send me any questions that you may have in regards to the material.